Welcome to Marketing. Grab some coffee and let's talk about what's working in marketing, who these strategies are designed for, and how to be customer-centric while we do it.
Hi there, this is Leanne with Marketing, and today I am joined by Branden Cobb. He is the founder of marketingexec.us, and I'm so excited because we have so much to learn here. So, Branden, could you just kick us off with a brief introduction and a bit of your background?
Sure, yeah. So thank you for having me, Leanne. I know we met at the Reuters conference recently in Los Angeles, where I was moderating several events with Fortune 500 CMOs and different things. And yeah, I have 17 years of marketing experience, both in-house or in like the branded side of in-house, but also on the consulting side as well, and helping various companies. And that's where I'm at now is really providing these fractional CMO services. I've helped over 15 companies in the last 2 years and really specializing on expanding throughout the United States. So part of that is working with international based companies that are looking to come into the US and kind of help them navigate that arena.
I love it. I think that we have a lot in common in that aspect, is that more even hyper local than that is that my specialty is California. But I think it's really important that these international companies get a perspective of someone like you who has subject matter expertise, I think is fair to call it. The Reuters conference was amazing, and I think you did a really great job moderating and also pulling out insights. I assign the ability to do so to you by having firsthand knowledge and insights and experience and learnings. So what I want to learn more about today is I want to drill down on this matter of advertising elasticity and all of these kind of perimeter subjects that we had in our one-on-one conversation.
Sure.
Where is call it a soapbox, if you will. What is your thing that you want people to really, you want to shout it out to the world, that people need to know this about this subject?
Sure. Well, one of the things I've really been focusing on is how to figure out making marketing a profit center, not a cost center. And so with that, understanding various ways that you can both in the pre-spend forecast accurately your marketing campaigns, and then the post-spend properly attribute them. And so, yeah, advertising elasticity, happy to make for the listeners to learn a lot in this episode about advertising elasticity and kind of the similarities and differences between it and ROAS, which may be possibly a more common term, but that they've heard, but they both have different purposes. Of advertising elasticity is a different measure than ROAS. So.
Yeah. And I think if we're going to start back at the beginning of the story, you mentioned this concept of beginning to connect the dots from one part of the journey to the end part of the journey. And I think that was, correct me here, was how you came to these conclusions that you had about the elasticity. So let's kind of start at the beginning. How do we define advertising elasticity? What would we one sentence it?
Sure. Yeah. So, a 1% change in advertising leads to what percent change in quantity demanded? So it's actually quantity demanded percentage increase divided by the percentage increase in advertising. So if you have a 6% increase in quantity demanded from a 1% change in advertising spend, then you would have, advertising elasticity of 6. So that, I guess, lays it out there.
Yeah. And I like how that you threw out ROAS earlier and kind of comparing and contrasting the two. ROAS seems to be more of like campaign by campaign almost, whereas elasticity seems to be more comprehensive.
That's right. Yeah. So, one of the major challenges with the marketing attribution side is really multi-touch. And so advertising elasticity may help somewhat with understanding the omni-channel effects and the long-term campaign effects of your advertising. versus the ROAS is more of a financial. So with advertising elasticity being a demand side metric, the ROAS would be more of a strictly financial metric that you could tie, yes, to more a zoomed in version on specifically just that campaign or that channel even specifically. So
yeah, and I think that all of this solves for what many of us are struggling with. Back to the point about attribution throughout the funnel is that we know that no one thing is what moves the needle. We know that you didn't just show up and see one of our ads and, oh my God, that blew your mind. And ta-da, you are suddenly a customer for life. That's not how it works. People are complicated. They may not be as complicated as we make them, but the omni-channel and answering for how we do attribution against omni-channel campaigns and aggregated ad spend and aggregated motions and how they all connect into each other is a pain point many of us feel.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so this, can give kind of that higher level view and help you with your strategy overall. But there's certain things you got to keep in mind that may affect that as well, which is possibly, I guess, kind of consumer buying patterns and seasonality, locality, economy, and some of these things as well. And so, but also ad pricing, because if you are changing, while this is a measure on the consumer response side for demand and not so much on specifically their willingness to what price they're willing to pay. So we're not looking at that total revenue like ROAS would do. But price elasticity also affects this consumer demand as well. But nevertheless, since we're only looking at consumer demand, the ad pricing may have an effect based on a percentage change. Like, for example, if you spend $10,000 and you're getting double the amount of impressions and double the amount of, I guess, reach during a certain time of year, then that $10,000 increase in spend is still a let's just call it the 1% increase, versus if you were getting half that amount of reach and impressions during another time of year. So one thing that I really spotted and thought that is very interesting is paying attention to the best time of year for advertising, and where it may not always be the most intuitively expected time of year where everybody else may already be going to it because the advertising may cost more at certain times of the year when you would think that is the best time of the year to advertise.
Yeah. So, what I'm hearing is about thinking about the inputs into the equation, since this is less of a financial one like ROAS, is kind of coming back to the beginning, which is going to be a theme, I guess, for today, and questioning our biases and looking at what the data says and looking at what those inputs into the equation, like how to make those make the most sense for our strategies and our budgeting and our forecasting. And so I'd love to hear more about your findings, or if you have any examples of something that happened where you were really like, that's it.
Yeah. Well, I think part of it is looking at one of the ahas for me was reading a research study about eBay that where there were a bunch of people were closing their auctions between 5 to 9 p.m. because that was the time period where the most amount of buyers were coming in and putting in bids. So then sellers rushed, and all the advice in the seller books and YouTube videos and things were saying, close between 5 to 9 p.m. That's when the most buyers. But this concept of aggregate versus residual demand. So what was happening was the aggregate buyer demand was greatest during the 5 to 9 p.m. However, because so many sellers were coming into the market during that period of time and ending their auctions, the actual residual demand was negative. So the sellers would have been better off selling at or closing their auction at 12 p.m., for example, when, there were far less buyers during that period of time, but there were even more or less sellers. So how this translates into this advertising elasticity is that concept of if you can look for periods of time when everybody is wanting to advertise, that may be the time you don't want to advertise, because let's just say Super Bowl, for example. Yeah, there's a huge aggregate, and this is not to say that what the advertising elasticity of a Super Bowl ad is, but the point is that when there's so many eyeballs watching, but if there's so many people wanting to advertise, then you see that the prices go extraordinarily high. Or going into the holiday seasons, for example, everybody knows consumers are going to have a greater demand. But if the demand for advertising also increases faster than the consumer demand increases, the advertising pricing will go up. And then your 1% increase in pricing will ultimately have less of an effect. And as a result, your advertising elasticity will be lower. So that I have found that is possibly the best time of year is the time somewhere in September, because what that does is you've got through the summer season. People are probably somewhat kind of starting to take a break. You're not into the Thanksgiving season and the holiday season yet. So it's a little dip in possibly advertisers' demands for advertisements, which may allow smaller to medium-sized companies to come in and buy advertising at a great time or for a great price. But because of the lag of the effect, it can actually carry over into the holiday season.
Yeah. And that was something that replicated my experience, which I thought was really cool, is that I've seen that firsthand across multiple industries, across like multiple years. And so I found it really interesting that, and then when I start to think about what's going on culturally during those times of years and what kind of milestones we assign per month, September really is kind of settle into your routine and be where you're going to be for the month. And therefore you're more apt to be accessible for being receptive to that type of advertising, right? You've already handled your back to school. You've already handled your summer travel. You've already done the Labor Day thing, and you're not quite yet at Halloween. And so you aren't quite, you might be in some regions like apple picking, but it's still a little early for that. It's still kind of warm. And then we have other routines like Monday Night Football, Thursday night, whatever football routines that really are intrinsic to the calendar of many Americans.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And like you just said, this concept may play well for America. It's location specific. I mean, like you mentioned, as if you go into state or you even go into city, it may change. But also, if you go to a different country, this schedule may not work. But here in the U.S., that seems like an interesting time of the year in September. And then the other thing is, part of this is being able to spot as advertising demand for advertising changes, as new communication technologies are created, new consumer behaviors are occurring, and where this little gap or this little dip where the buyer demand is not hasn't lowered as much as possibly the advertising pricing has lowered. As you spot where that moves as the world changes as well. So keeping on a lookout for that.
Yeah. And I kind of want to also reiterate a point of what you said earlier about the and part of this, is that there may be residual branding lift when it does come time to the holidays, because then you aren't like first touch in October 31st. There's more recognition or more lift in recent top of mind. The bigger brands, they're just known. It's less of, oh, this is the first time I'm meeting you, and more of a, yeah, I exist. Yeah, I exist. And it feels more familiar instead of jarring, like you're just trying to get holiday spending out of me.
Yeah. Well, and because those bigger brands have their brand recognition already, they can place an ad in October, November, December and have a kind of a faster immediate impact from that ad because they already have built that up. But like you're saying, yeah, there is that time lag, number one. But number two, one of the things, small to medium sized businesses, they tend to need to see their return faster than larger businesses. They can wait it out. And if you think about this of being September, possibly playing out over the holiday season, then that's not too long of a return. I mean, probably most businesses could look over a 6-month period, spend and analyze after a 6-month period, but they may not be able to wait a year or 2 years, that kind of thing, like a larger business could. So yeah, I think this is a good strategy for, small to medium sized businesses.
And I love that disclaimer to it is that this is not necessarily for everybody, but this is who it really, really shines for. Because there's always, certain types of industries that have longer buying cycles. For example, when we talk about seasonality, I could easily say that while California is a warm weather state, we still fall to certain amounts of seasonality with like real estate. It's not as dramatic as the Midwest, where you are basically forbidden for moving for 3 months of the year. But there's still the people are entrenched and they're less likely to make moves if they don't have to. So this wouldn't apply to like necessarily a small real estate residential broker, but it would apply to more of, name some specific companies that you think like industries or types of products.
Yeah, I mean, any type of consumer packaged good, any type of possibly like a toy, anything you could think that maybe come November, December would be important for gifting. Those kind of, but a small to medium sized company is who needs to be that scrappy, looking for that opportunity, and so then possibly to achieve the highest advertising elasticity for them would be to go in big. Early, like right there, tail end of summer, fall, and then cut your advertising. Let the big players go in and pay the big bucks as the season grows on, and just try that out, and then see after those 6 months where you're at.
Yeah, absolutely. And in my previous experience, I would call out regional banks. Regional banks. This is a great time. Regional anything, I would call it, would be a great time for you to really carve out that recognition instead of the like entire nation types of bigger entities in a different context. That being said, is that there is consideration about how you show up all year round. And go ahead.
Well, absolutely. Yeah. So, I mean, when you're talking about that time lag and stuff, that and how you show up year round, it got me thinking on a whole nother concept, which was like when downturns in economy occur somewhat, a lot of people cut marketing. But if you keep your marketing going during that period, then what it will do is it will enable a faster pick back up later, and you'll continue to have those deposits in your brand bank or deposits in your customers' minds. So where I'm going, so that's another opportunity possibly where advertising pricing comes down. If advertisers or companies stop spending a little bit as the economy comes down, but you keep going forward, that's a period where at any time of the year it may play out where you'll see a greater advertising elasticity, even if it's not immediately as the economy picks back up. You should be able to pick back up faster.
Yeah, I love it. I like to encourage people to switch their mindset from, oh no, the sky is falling, into fire sale. Think about what you can get on clearance. Think about the discount that you can get because no one else wants to do it. And, you're cutting through the noise. We're always looking for the best price and how to break through the noise of all this marketing and advertising. And it really is go where other people aren't, that your customer still is.
That's exactly it. And that's the whole concept to that residual versus aggregate demand. And it's also, I heard it many years ago, Dave Ramsey say something like, if everybody's doing this, it's probably not what I want to be doing. Like I want to run the opposite way of a lot of other people. And I think, and I didn't quite understand it then, but I think where that comes back around is this residual demand versus aggregate demand. And just understanding that, how that affects, the success, the profitability of your advertising. And also another thing I'll say too is, and you mentioned it with that, every business has its own unique situation. Advertising is not profitable for all businesses. Actually, advertising is not profitable probably for majority of businesses of sorts. But there's some areas where it is very, very profitable for businesses. And I would argue that it's when businesses are starting off, they have to advertise. And once they're very large, they don't have to, they have those benefits that we were talking about, like, you can place it and you kind of have an immediate impact because of your brand. But if you're large, you can have some major advertising success. And if you're very small, you may be able to. And somewhere in the middle, there's potentially some spots where the advertising returns go negative for a period of time of sort. So,
yeah, absolutely. And I want to add this because we haven't quite touched on this yet. A lot of B2B companies forget that they're involved in this conversation. Just because they don't have a consumer packaged good doesn't mean that they need to, or that they're free from ignoring this type of trend. And I think about this with like SaaS. I think about this all across many industries. Is a lot of what we talk about in the B2C space is actually pretty agnostic. Like when you come back to the fundamentals, if you are looking for lower cost, it's just different time of year for seasonality. At the same time, September really is a pretty clutch month. It's before the last minute end of revenue year for company spending.
True.
It is, it's not so last minute that you can't like get a really good deal in. At least it may not be like implemented until the next calendar year, but it's also during budgeting season.
That's right.
And you need to get your stuff in, and you need to be top of mind during budgeting season. Otherwise, you're just never going to show up. You're gone. You got to wait till the next cycle.
Absolutely. It's a very good point that people may be wanting to use up the remaining of their spend before the new year starts as well and everything. And so, that's very good on the B2B side. And I think there's a lot of principles that carry over B2B and B2C. Just thinking how the consumer in either case, the individual or the employee, the leader at a company versus an individual end consumer makes decisions and who they consult with and what kind of potential influences you can have on anybody that they may be consulting with to give your brand a positive impression in their mind. So they'll put in that they'll think positively and have a positive discussion when the roundtable's happening. I think that's part of the opportunity of, even in a cheap advertising period of time too, is being able to possibly hit the sphere around the decision makers too. So
yeah, part of me wishes we had given the wrong month just to maintain that lack of popularity. Just throw people to the wrong. Actually, guys, we're talking about December.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, and that's part of why marketing attribution and forecasting is going to always be so difficult, is because people are always going to respond. They're going to take, it's just like economics. People, when they see or the stock market, anything else, markets are somewhat efficient. When people see an opportunity, they're going to adjust. But you have to, if you understand the principles of what we're talking about today, you may be able to help spot as that pinpoint moves, as consumers and as your competitors respond and do things differently, where the opportunity may exist. It just may bounce around where that exists.
Yeah. And I also think that the last disclaimer is always answer for immediate business needs first. You can't always time the market. Sometimes you just need to advertise to get people in the door. And you cannot hold your breath waiting for the cheapest moment or the advertising to go on, like let's say there's some magical billboard sale. Like you can't just put off your business needs in hope for the cheapest price. You've got to do what you've got to do to keep the doors open and the lights on.
Sure, absolutely.
Thinking back to real estate specifically, I was like, sometimes people wait they wait forever for the lowest interest rates, and then before they know it, it's back up. They miss the boat.
Yeah. Now, I mean, thinking on the business side of real estate, and I've done quite a bit of advertising on the real estate side as well, but this goes into any industry, is understanding those industries' patterns and knowing that that the buying season may wrap up as fall begins, kind of as school begins, as people are situated in their home, but then picks back up in the spring and fast into the summer. Knowing that if that's the cycle, that may be a very different cycle than I don't know. I mean, like winter coats or something.
Yeah.
So understanding the patterns of the industry that you're trying, or a product or industry that you're trying to sell, may have an effect on when that perfect time of year is, and that's you've said it all along as well. So
yeah. And just to clarify, it was more of a generality comparison of like, this is cliche wisdom for a reason. You really should get what you need when you need it. Get the best price you can at that time. But if you need it, you need it. And, Dave Ramsey always triggers memories of being in real estate associated markets.
Yeah.
You can't touch mortgages without hearing Dave Ramsey. For those listening out there, I will refrain from giving editorial about different types of personal finance advice. He's one of many. Google it. There's lots of options out there. The point being is that he had a lot of wisdom about going where no one else is. And that's what we're talking about. We're talking about finding those special points for your business where you can get the best input for this advertising elasticity formula, if you will.
Yeah, that's right. And there's just continuing on with where you were going with that, is that you have to keep cash flow, you have to keep revenue coming in all year long. So you're going to have to advertise when you need to advertise. You're going to need to, but if you're able to think ahead and you're able to plan and you're in your annual budgeting and you're able to try to figure out when may be a best time. There could be a best time of the year, and just understanding that advertising elasticity is not constant through the year, and it's just not always when the most consumers will be shopping or where it will be the highest. Keeping that in mind, then now you have to go do what you got to do and put that in play. Yeah.
And it just occurred to me that this is also great ammunition for when you have conversations regarding budget to like upwards within your organization. If they're like, hey, you guys, you got this really great number last month. How come this month is more expensive? You've got to be able to intelligently educate about how that may occur without any fault of yourself.
Yeah.
And you've got to take accountability for when it is you. Sometimes it is us. But if it really is that pricing went up, then it's the cost of doing business that changed.
Sure. Yeah, that's absolutely true. And I think being able to understand how things respond and why things go up or go down, that provides the explanations that the financial people, your CFOs, your CEOs, those kind of things, those kind of people need in your organization. They're going to demand of you in order to continue to provide you the budget that you need to go about next year and next month and continue on. So yeah, that's exactly right. That sometimes the successes are are often not, there's an old saying, I think it's from sports specifically, but like people who succeed often get like way more credit than they need or than they deserve, and people who fail often get way more criticism than they deserve. So you're probably living somewhere in the middle there, and that when things do go down, you need to be able to explain it. It may not all be your fault, but if you can positively and competently explain it, then that will help you with your relationships internally. And then when things succeed as well, just staying humble and explaining the principles of why possibly that succeeded. So
yeah, and I'm tying it into the point earlier about attribution. This is why having consistent, clean data can really help support what you're doing and how you're doing it, and giving it that credibility more than just, oh, well, we did great because, I don't know, we just brought in a lot of revenue. Having that objective data that you can cite, hopefully you do good enough, well enough to not need to cite your proof, but it helps to provide that confidence when those times do pop up, that you're like, no, this is, here's my dashboard, here's my beautiful graph. This is really what happened. It's not my opinion. It's these facts, these objective data points that I can provide to you. I think that that's another way to build your credibility.
Absolutely. Trackability and the data gives you that. And the thing is, even when you are succeeding, I've been in this situation where the returns on the campaigns we're doing are satisfactory or even beating expectations of what a CFO or CEO that I would be responding into were wanting. However, they realize that's working. They want to understand why that's working so they can go repeat it, whether you're there or not there, or there's probably ways to continue optimizing that a little bit more, even if it's effective. If you're able to identify the effective spends from the ineffective spends, you'll be able to pump into the effective spends, pull out of the ineffective spends. But then the problem becomes that sometimes it's not so simple as that. There's underlying synergies that are occurring with something that seems ineffective on the surface is actually synergetic under the surface. And so you got to be careful changing up your mixtures, but nevertheless, trackability, both when failing, when succeeding, when doing mediocre, is going to allow you to adjust and continue to move forward.
Yeah. And while this may not necessarily be applicable to small to medium-sized businesses, but when you can drill down into segments and how those are performing, or maybe you just find a hypothesis of something that you need to research further or get more market like direct research and insights. And it reminds me of the story shared at the Routers conference of the fast food entity advertised to we'll call them young male demographic. And they found that it was actually elderly people that were coming to their businesses quite frequently in this one community. And so I think about that, and I think about how we can, about who else is hearing our message, and leaving the fringe people and feeding the fringe people while still maintaining focus on the main key core component.
Well, that's very interesting because anytime talking about even fringe segments, like for example, that may be where there is more residual demand because your competitors are thinking they're going after the primary, the standard, the stereotypical segment for your product or service. But if there are segments that are still have some demand or interest on the fringes, they may return better. And if you can find those opportunities, then pump into until you start hitting diminishing returns, or until you have a better area to pump into. That's a very, very good point. That don't forget about the fringes. So
yeah, that was definitely one of those like, oh my God, I should have thought about that examples I got from that conference, not to totally focus on why everyone should consider it. No, I'm not a commercial for it. This is not sponsored. All right. I've got 2 questions left that I really want to hear your specific points of view on. The future. Where is marketing going? Where do you think it should go? Is that the same? What are your thoughts there?
Yeah. I mean, marketing is going where, as well as every other department, really, where you're just able to take a lot more data and convert that data into usable insights. So the data has always been, in a way, a currency, but a lot of times data has been not capable of being computed into a usable insights. And so the more mass data we can take, the more precise insights we can receive. And AI and various machine learnings are helping to make that possible. And then as a result of that mass data becoming usable insights, we're able to become, as marketers, more personalized with our marketing. And when you become more personalized, you're becoming more relevant. And through relevancy, you should be able to see some type of lift in the conversion as well.
So hyper-personalization, I'm really happy you brought that up because I'm really excited to see people do this right. And I think that we've all seen people do this wrong. But I'm really excited to see that people are attaching objective data in a more meaningful way. I think that was one of the things that you clarified about the future marketing is that that's inevitable. It's going to happen and you can't stop it, and nor should you. I think one caveat is that we're going to see a little bit less of those cookies data eventually, but that's the doomsday that's not dooming. We'll see.
Yeah. Well, with personalization, I think it's going to be a lot of zero and first party data that you're going to have to gather. But as you personalize, just keeping in mind that nevertheless, it is going to be, you're working. Don't forget that the consumer experience matters, and putting yourself in their shoes, and as long as you're working on behalf of improving their experience, yes, you're also trying to sell more and you're trying to increase your revenues. I mean, that may be whatever percentage of your focus or effort or of interest. But if you make it all about just personalizing to sell more, it may not work out as well as if you're personalizing to improve their experience, which then mediates ultimately selling more. So,
yeah, personalize for delight, not for dismay.
Yeah.
All right, the big one. What is a question someone should ask you, but they don't? And just as a reminder, this could be anything from professional expertise. They start way at the end. They really need to ask you questions about the beginning, or something about you as a human that we wouldn't know and that you really just enjoy talking about.
Yeah. Something I've never really been asked. I mean, my wife knows and people close to me know, but people don't typically ask is just like how much time and effort you put in towards something. And I'm not saying that this is something I advocate for or proud of or anything like that. But I mean, I put a lot of time every day into practicing the profession and continual professional development and various things. And with that, there's a bit of compounding on the efforts you put in. So yeah, you may only see a very, very marginal lift or zero just slightly, like insignificant amount. But when you do that over time, that really builds upon all these days of hard work and things really builds upon each other and starts to show results. Now, ultimately, I think the advice though would just be to do whatever makes you happy and whatever is going to be your passion and fulfilling for you.
That's wonderful advice. I really appreciate that. I think I agree wholeheartedly that if you're a voracious learner, you will get far. And practice and doing all of these things definitely compound. And I think that's a wonderful thing to leave people with, is really just understand that you're committing to something and go for it, whatever that looks like for you, whatever that thing is. You'll get those returns, whether, it's professionally or personally, short of marathon runners who go too hard and get injured, but they still, there's go for it is the moral of the story. And I really appreciate that uplifting note. I think that was a really unique and wonderful way of answering that question. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much. And thank you for having me on the show as well.
Yeah, thank you. So if someone wanted to reach out to you, how is the best way for them to get in touch?
Sure, yeah. So you can go to our website, marketingexec.us. You can email me at Branden, and notice that my name here is spelled Branden. So Branden at marketingexec.us, or find me on LinkedIn. That's another way. And just connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm happy to message there. Happy to do a strategy session and see what kind of situation you're going through.
Awesome. And once again, my name is Leanne. If you have any questions for me or the podcast, it is info@markigy.com. Thank you so much.